they've been focused on their careers for so long that wrapped up in that is the idea that like independence is the way to structure your life, and they are very independent, focus on their careers, put their careers first.
I forgot to hit record on the audio. Oh my
God. You do this all the time.
So guys, good to be back doing another video with you. Maybe we could start off by telling people about your new Substack that I hear you have.
Yes, we've launched a Substack. It's mysticsisters.substack.com, and the link will be in the description. And it's we've always kind of kept our online presences separate, but we've always really liked creating together. Like, we're fire dancers, and so like in the real world, we do fire dancing performances together and things like that. But we also like to write and make art, and that we've always kind of promoted separately online. So we thought it would be fun to have a space where we can write about art and relationships and beauty and culture and have that under one joint place. So we started a Substack. We'll be posting these podcasts there, and then other blog posts and Amy's art and other content. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for that. I noticed that your t-shirts say
the
Mystic
name
Sisters
of your Substack.
Our friend made these for us.
Yeah, we call ourselves the Mystic Sisters with our friend Sloan as well. So she bought us these.
There's a third Mystic Sister.
There's a third Mystic Sister.
But you two are the genetically related Mystic Sisters.
Yeah.
Genetic Mystic Sisters and spiritual Mystic Sisters.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for it. Like you both have so much creativity and generative power individually and combined. That's just straight up scary.
I don't want to be scary. We did meet a girl at a bar recently who was like, "Are you guys twins? I'm scared." And I kind of understood what she meant. It might be a little...
There's something a little uncanny about it.
Yeah.
Glitch in the matrixy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, one day in San Francisco, we met 3 sets of twins within an hour on the same, 3 blocks of the city. It was
we
the
have photos
weirdest
with
thing.
all of them, and it was really weird.
Really weird. We're just walking and
We were
saw
like,
twins.
they look like twins. And then we went to a cafe next to us. They look like twins.
Matrix was acting up that day.
The simulation is glitching out.
Yep.
All right. Well, we wanted to do a podcast today on celebrities, feminism, and those kinds of things. Celebrities, pop stars, and feminism. So I wanted to ask you to start, who were you noticing? What's going on?
Well, we used to really like, and I still like her, a pop star called Marina Diamandis, and she used to go by Marina and the Diamonds, and now she's just Marina. And we liked her when we were younger because she was unique in the space of pop stars. She wasn't mainstream or commercially successful, but kind of like an alt pop star, I suppose. She had an online fan base. But she would sing and write her own music and talk about how she wasn't a feminist, which made her unique in the space. She had a line where she said, "You really want me to write a feminist anthem? I'm happy cooking dinner in the kitchen for my husband, and I'm never going to give you anything you expect." And kind of setting herself apart that way, saying, I'm kind of happy with the traditional stuff. But unfortunately, now she's kind of become woke, and it's really disappointing. And we've just been kind of watching her online, and she's really doubled down on this, I don't need anybody, certainly don't need a man, happy being alone.
Isn't that one of her new songs? Happy Alone?
Happy Alone.
Yeah, and then she has a song called, A Man's World, and it's I don't want to live in a man's world anymore, and just really kind of, her music has become political and, feeding into the sort of ideas that we try to combat a lot, which is that women are oppressed and you don't need a man, and these kind of dominant cultural ideas that are pretty bad for women, but she's really leaning into it.
It's ironic because she's a super a pop star, and then she's saying it's a man's world. It's coming from you, this is silly because you're extremely wealthy, and that's always the deep irony of it is or not so deep, but these really rich and famous women talk about how oppressed women are, and it's that's clearly not true.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just been interesting to watch like the trajectory of some of these pop stars that we've liked for a long time and just what kind of directions they've gone in. Like Lady Gaga was one we were into in our 20s, and not so much anymore, but like it's been interesting because her message was always pretty feminist. Like she was very into like sexual liberation culture. You just get that sense from like watching her music videos and listening to her songs. Obviously, a lot of sexual innuendo and stuff. Which isn't great, but young girls this is what they're listening to. And now she's 36, and in her interviews, she's talking a lot about how she's thinking about wanting kids and like when I have kids and like thinking about family and stuff. But it's kind of interesting to consider like how her ideas have maybe like led to her not knowing how to make that happen, and just how obviously she's someone who's like put her career first, right?
Yeah.
And in order to have a family and have children, you're going to have to like reorient some priorities, and you can't always be putting yourself and your career success first. And that's like a problem that really ambitious women often run into. So we're kind of seeing that with Lady Gaga in particular.
Yeah, it's kind of, she's an interesting figure because she was raised like Italian Catholic, and then, you know, is very progressive, but like she still kind of has that like Catholicism in her a little bit, I think, where she like does want the traditional family life in a way, but then she can't square that with like her jet-setting career and her fame. It's just like, I feel a little bad for her, actually.
She actually has a song about that too on her art pop album. The song Gypsy is about her wanting to like jet set and do whatever she wants, but also,
I don't want to be alone forever, but I love gypsy life.
Yeah, like she's kind of singing about and getting at the thing where like settling down is at odds with being this like jet-setting careerist, right?
Right.
And I think women who are really like raised in a culture of like, stick it to the man, like you're oppressed, so show them what you can do. And so women go, oh my gosh, women are being held back. Well, I'm gonna show them what I can do. I'm gonna like have this ambitious career or whatever. And then that's kind of at odds with like getting to where they want in terms of family life.
It's just unfortunate. Like, people are hard on women about all this stuff, and I feel like there should be some compassionate, like, for how hard this actually is to deal with in the modern world. Like, you're getting, like, that message all the time, and then, like, you might realize, like, oh, wait, I do want a family more than I wanted, like, this career, and it's just, like, I don't know, people are kind of like, well, what did you expect? But it's like, no one's really helping women with this, like in their youth. You don't get the message to be a wife or a mother at all anymore. That message is gone. I don't know why. Some people will say that that's all women are told, and I don't know where they're getting that from. Because
sounds like they're about 60 years out of date.
Yeah, it's
like the message that you don't need to be a wife or a mother was really revolutionary in like 1956. And now they're playing revolutionary, but they're supporting the dominant side and being really safe. Like, there's actually no danger in telling women to like forget traditional family life and be independent and all this. You're not a revolutionary. You won like 40 years ago.
Yeah, right. And you know, I think that there's so I've often thought about like, okay, what's the like alternative message to this, right?
Yeah.
I think women often there's this struggle of like, do we tell women to be wives and mothers and potentially squash their potential of their like creative abilities or contributions in other realms, or do we tell them to go be ambitious and focus on their careers to the detriment of, I think, what makes life worth living, which is family life. And people don't seem to know like how to message to women, right? And I think that Suzanne Venker does a very good job of this. She's a relationship coach and a writer, and she's written a lot of books about feminism and how it can mislead women, and she gives really good relationship advice. And I did do social media work for her for a few months, but she always tells women that you can have your career or your projects, whatever it is that you're ambitious about, and a family life, but you need to think of things more as having them in piecemeal fashion over the course of your life. So like there's gonna be a time where you are gonna have to scale back your career if you wanna have kids. And then there's gonna be a time where you can focus on your career, like her children are grown, right? So now she's you know, running full speed ahead with her writing and her coaching business and all of this. So I think there's kind of like a false dichotomy where it's like one or the other. But for women, you can do the things you want to do just in like different chunks of time over your life. And I think one of the things that does hurt women though is that we're told to delay the family part. And then we have to figure it all out in this short frame of time in our like late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s.
Or like Lady Gaga, 36, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
You're 36, now figure it out. That's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And then it's like you want to feel like you can have the time to develop a relationship with someone and determine that they'd be a good husband and father. And then, but women have been told to put that off. So then they are rushing, and it just, the timeline that we sell women is off. But I think that it would be good if the message was more, the cultural message was more like what Suzanne says, where it's like, yeah, you have plenty of time to do all these things, but maybe your 20s are for looking for the right husband and father.
And dually, you would need to tell men that too, though, because I don't know what messages men are really getting. I don't think it's like you should find a wife when they're in their early 20s, though. A lot of them like aren't established in their careers, and like maybe they're goofing off a bit too. So it's like men need to tell younger men that, and then older women need to spread the message that you were just saying to younger women. It's like everyone has like a responsibility to like their own sex kind of to spread this. I don't know.
The way that the culture is now, it's like I don't think a lot of people are ready for marriage and family in their 20s, and there's a lot of things going into that. I think maybe public school has something to do with it. We're so like confined when we're in our teen years, instead of going out and engaging with the world and learning who we are and making mistakes. We're just like stuck in these public institutions for so long.
Yeah.
I think that might have something to do with it. So then when people do hit their 20s, they just kind of go wild, and that's their time to travel and explore. And maybe it'd be good to do a little bit of that younger. But it kind of all ties back into something else we were wanting to talk about, which was like Peter Pan syndrome, right? Like where it can be hard for women because women maybe do want to have their boyfriends like commit and marry them, and yet the men are just kind of wanting to have fun and like date and have her around, but like not promise her anything. And this happens to many women throughout their 20s.
Yeah, it's really common, and I don't think people quite talk about it enough. Like men that just like they string. Every girl I know has a story like this, where a guy just like strung her along for a couple years, and then it was like, hey, what are we doing? And he was like, well, I don't really want to get married, and then she's left very confused and hurt. And I don't want to like blame men, but like it is a very, very common thing. So like, what can we do about that problem? I don't know, but yeah. And then because I think men don't have the pressure of time. Like biology kind of pressures women because they like have a shorter clock for having a family since it's so hard on their bodies, and men don't really have that. So like they can kind of keep screwing around in their 30s, and that there isn't really like too much of I don't think it's good though, because I think the female 30 is the male 40. Like men look at 40 and they're like, oh, I really don't want to be like this 40-year-old like single guy without a family. And then women look at 30 and they're like, I don't want to be in my 30s without a family either. So like it's just like there's like this 10-year gap in maturity that's like very, very difficult, I think, for people to navigate, because I don't know. I'm encountering guys in their early 30s that are still like, I have plenty of time. Like, you're too serious. So it's like...
I dated someone in my 20s who was like, I don't want to get married till I'm 40. And I was like, then what are we doing here? I was like 26. And I was like, then why are we dating?
I've heard that. Guys will say
like,
that.
I don't have till I'm 40.
Yeah. My ex just said that too. I don't want to get married till I'm 40. I'm like, then... Okay.
Yeah.
So that's pushing it to me. Like, I was never like, I want to get married when I'm 30. I have wanted to get married since I was like 25, but maybe that's too late to the game too. I don't know, but there's a lot of cultural messaging you just have to wade through and like deprogram. And I think, you know, it's good if people go to church and they're getting good messages about like starting a family, but my friend's priest said like the rest of the time they're out in the world, like he's like, I only have young people here for a couple hours a week, and then the rest of the time the world has them, and they're out there like getting these temptations and messages from the world. So
and
it's a hard thing.
I think a lot of times too, the church doesn't have an explicit message around family life and what that should look like. I mean, at best, I think most churches you maybe are around better examples, but it's more of a cultural thing where you're absorbing, like seeing more younger married couples in church. So you're like, oh, it's something I can do. I can get married. But I think we're just entering a phase, especially in depending on what region you're in, where you can't count on that anymore. Like people in the churches are also getting married a lot later and having smaller families or not having families. So maybe there's some room for more explicit direction from religious authorities. I see kind of in my life, it's very cultural, where my friends who were religious and grew up in North Carolina, a lot of them got married right after college. that was kind of the thing you did. Whereas, I wasn't religious at the time, and I went off to DC and California, and when I was, in a relationship and 35, I didn't know whether or not I was ready to be married. Like, I didn't feel ready at 35. So there's some cultural gap here where, like, legacy America maybe still gets married at 23, whereas, like, new America, blue city America at 35, they feel kind of pressured by their girlfriend, and they're a little scared of commitment still.
What do you think that is? I'm curious about, like, the not feeling ready feeling. Like, is that a genuine feeling, or is it like just something you tell yourself? I don't know. Because is anyone ever really, like, completely ready for that? It's like, you've never done it before,
Yeah, well, I think it's easy when you have other people. It's easier when you have other people around you doing it. Like, there's a lot of FOMO and commitment. I mean, commitments, and there's a reason why people are afraid of commitment, because, like, once you decide on something, changing your mind is very costly. Or impossible, maybe in some cases. Like, you can't unhave a kid, post-birth abortion is illegal, thank God. So people, there's, like, reason to be fearful, but if everyone around you is doing it and most people turn out okay, then that helps.
Right, yeah, it's not so scary, demystifies it a little bit.
And we live a lot in our heads, right? Like, very separated from our biology. Like, it's making a physical, biological decision to, like, get married and have a child is very divorced from the world of computer simulation.
It's not very rational.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think it is rational, but it's also, like, pretty absurd at the same time.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of goes against the way that we're kind of trained to think in the modern world, which is like to, like, increase our optionality, to preserve our freedom, to acquire more, like, resources for ourselves instead of giving them away to someone. Like, it's all, like, everything that goes into having a family, I think, it's sacrifice, and it's making a choice, giving up your other options. Like, a lot of those things are just not concepts we see as, like, good or virtuous in the modern world. It's, like, quite the opposite. And I think that kind of prevents people from going there in their minds and seeing it as something worthwhile.
Yeah, we grew up on the, like, follow your dreams, like,
you can do anything.
You can do anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not true. That's it's just not true. Like, and I don't want to be, like, a cold, mean realist either, but, like, because I'm a pretty romantic person, but it's also, like, I don't know. I don't think people are realistic enough about, like, what you can do and what will lead you to, like, a fulfilling life. And it's just, we have a very, like, laissez-faire, like, do whatever you want, like, kind of culture in America. It's just very libertarian, and there's not a lot of, like, moral and social guidelines around people. I guess for some people, like, you're saying, like, certain people, depending on where they live and, like, maybe their socioeconomic status, there's more of the old America there. But for new, smart people who can get a lot of resources, it's just different, I think.
Definitely geographical too. Like, the South, people seem to be more religious and get married younger, but, like, the North and the West, not so much. And I've only ever lived in the North and the West, the Northeast and the West, and so it was just kind of like, I don't know, like, there was, like, maybe like a class element to it as well, where, like, people who weren't as ambitious in their careers and things were the people who got married and had kids younger, and then the people who were, like, smart and ambitious and, like, had, like, a lot of career potential, those were the people that would just delay it a lot. And so I don't know. I don't know how
seems to be the case.
I think a lot of what makes it hard to have a family is also, like, mirroring what other people are doing. Like this idea, FOMO comes from seeing other people having good times or doing things that maybe you didn't see as much before. Like, my peers are traveling a lot. My peers are taking risk in their careers. My peers are being art punks. So I want to try those things. And maybe it was just less common, and people didn't travel as much or have as much leisure or
see as much on, like, a phone. You can just, like, see what everyone's up to today.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are like, oh, this person's, like, a world traveling social media star who, like I want to be like that. And it's like, was that even a thing, like, 40 years ago?
Yeah,
like,
again, back to, like, optionality. Is it just, like, there, and this maybe also does go hand in hand with, like, the increasing, like, standard of living of the average American. Like the average American has more money and like has more opportunity to travel or ability to travel and try different things and do different things.
Traveling's so easy now.
Yeah, whereas in the past it was like you didn't have too many options actually. It was like you're from a small town, there's like the local coal mine or whatever factory was there, and you probably are from a family that like doesn't have as much money. I mean, the immigrants that came to this country, a lot of them didn't have much. They came here because they didn't have much. And so you marry the girl down the street and start your family and work in the factory and like.
And if you wanted to move, I don't know. I know people did move, but I feel like people are moving around at a way greater rate because you can just like look up on Zillow or like apartments on Craigslist, and you don't need to have like a connection wherever you're going.
It's easier to research different places. It's easier to find a home in a different place.
You can see a million pictures of it. You like know what you're getting into. Just like the rate like of tech changing things for people. It's like it makes my head spin sometimes like how quickly everything changed.
Yeah, you can see all the options just like as soon as you
open a phone. Yeah. So
I wanted to ask you about something that came up a little bit earlier. This idea of like independence and not needing anyone else. Is that what's wrong with that? It sounds really American, like, you know, independence, individualism, like forging your own path.
I think people just don't exist in a vacuum. It's the idea that like you're just on your own, and people kind of demonize the word codependent, but I always thought that word wasn't that bad. It's like we are people replace it with interdependent, but like we're social creatures, we're communal creatures, and we do depend on each other to a degree, and we even like regulate each other's like bodies and like emotions, and you know, we're a human species. So it just seems a little like dehumanizing to me to say that everyone's just an individual who like doesn't need anybody. It's like, yes, you do, because this pop star we were talking about, she loves being alone. And I look at her social media and she's with people all the time. Like, what do you even mean by that? Like, you need people. Like, so
I think we're happier and more fulfilled when we're caring for other people, or like you know, I really like cooking meals for people, right, and enjoying a meal with people that I love, and whenever I don't have the opportunity. There were many times I was living in like San Francisco, like early in my career and whatnot, and would like go to work and then like have dinner alone and just be like, oh, this is like not like it's like I'm independent. I bought the food myself, I cooked it myself, but I'm like I feel like something's missing.
I did everything they told me to do. Like I got the job and I'm a strong, independent woman, and no one's here.
Americans really like. I think that the idea of independence, maybe, I don't know, I'm just going to speculate here, but like maybe it started off with like, you know, independence from government rule, government imposition, right? Like we want to build a country where we are free to make our own decisions and the government's not breathing down our necks and whatever. But maybe that's been taken. I think Americans have taken ideas of independence and freedom up to their end, which and to their extreme in ways that has not been fruitful.
Or maybe that like works for a government and like a political movement, but on the individual level, it just makes everyone lonely. Like,
right, like the way that we structure our like lives, our personal lives and our communities, like you do, I think the fruits are better when you have a concept of like duty to others, responsibility to others, rather than just not blind, but you know, constant individual pursuit.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad to depend on people. I depend on my dad for a lot of things. Like, I'm not married, and I depend on my dad for lots of things, like, you know, help with my car and like help moving and things like that. Like, so just to... Well, I imagine everyone who's saying they love being independent and don't want to depend on a man actually are depending on maybe a lot of men even.
Well, it might even be tying back into pride. Like, it definitely is easier than ever in the modern world to like just take care of yourself, right? And to just like, and to take care of your basic needs on your own, right? But we are all limited beings, and there are strengths that like, that I have that you don't have, or that you have that I don't have. And so when we're, you know, working together as a whole, then we fill in each other's gaps.
Right.
Whereas we sort of like fetishize or idolize the idea of like doing it all on our own. And I think that kind of sets us up as like tiny gods who just can do anything and are perfect and don't have any like shortcomings or places where we need other people to step in and help.
Right. It's humble to say like, I'm not as good at this thing as you are. Can you help me with it? That's a very humble like position.
And this goes back to the like Christians talk a lot about how men and women are complementary, and how like men offer things that women don't offer, and women offer things that men don't offer, just like through their nature, right? Like women are more focused on relationships and people. They have more of like a desire to nurture and care for small beings and animals, and nurture those things, and to like beautify spaces, beautify homes. And men are more interested in like building things and
structure.
Practical. You know, men I find are better at like finance and managing money and like and making money and like building companies and all of this sort of thing.
How systems work.
Yeah, and so like both of these things are needed. Like they make up the whole of life, but we need each other to contribute in the realms where we're weaker. And I think we've become too prideful to like admit that there's like gaps, things that we need someone else to help fill in.
Yeah, and I think tech is what is allowing for us to have this like androgynous society where everyone's just like a they them, I guess. Like I think that only in a very comfortable modern world can you pretend that you don't need other people, or that other people like are inherently like different from you. Like only because you can like order food on your phone are you insulated from like the physical realities of life and physical and biological realities.
Well, urbanization too, right? Like something that one of our friends said once is like, when you live out in a rural area, there's no question about like
who's stronger physically.
Who's physically stronger between the sexes when like a tree falls in the middle of the road. Like the men are going to clear the tree,
yeah.
Right? So like when you're directly interacting with the physical world, I think male-female complementariness is more obvious, but we live in such a digital society and a society where a lot of people live in urban environments where those differences aren't as obvious. It's not as obvious why they're needed or why keeping them in focus is needed. And then we kind of have this delusion that like we're all the same, and the lines get blurred.
Yeah.
Yeah, if everyone's just, Reddit avatars or something, the differences there between male and female interaction are much more subtle than if you're clearing a tree from a road.
Yeah, and you'll even hear, like, I've read a couple of articles recently with parents who have children who are transgender, and they say that once they take away their social media and get them offline and get them like interacting with the world, like some of these parents will like have their children like volunteer at a farm and work with animals. They start to kind of come back down to accepting the gender that they were born as, and that stuff kind of dissipates. But it's when they're really like plugged into the digital world that they like come under this idea. So there's something about gender being like tied to physical reality that I think is getting weirdly lost in the digital reality that we live in now.
Yeah, just because it's hard to, if you just text on a screen, it can be hard to tell who's a man and a woman online, So if you're spending so much time on the internet, I can see why you'd start to think like this stuff is irrelevant for a modern world, but I don't think that's the case.
Also, I think it's like something people miss when they try to be independent through the use of technology is how sad it is to, I mean, it's possible, but it's very sad.
Yeah.
Like when I first moved to Silicon Valley and I was working at a startup there in Mountain View, I remember some weekends where I didn't talk to anyone that I didn't pay. And sure, I can go out and pay someone to like bring me food, but if my fiance cooks food for me, there's something about that I can't pay to have that same experience. Or if I cook food for her, like there's a joy and a savoriness to life that comes from that interdependence that like when we mediate all of our interactions and needs to the marketplace, it's lost.
When I lived in California, I've never been more lonely in my entire life, and I think it's just the culture out there. It's so tech heavy and it's so feminist. Those two things are a very bad mix, I think, because it was just like, I don't know, I ate so many meals by myself and found myself alone all the time and always on the internet, and a lot of the time all I had was you out there, and for a lot of complicated reasons that would take a while to unravel like why it was like that, but I was just very atomized, and I think that's why I come down so hard on why my values I've raised family so high in my value system, because I've lived that atomized, like, lonely life where you're like paying everyone to do things for you. It's just not the way.
I think a lot of people miss out on this intersection between feminism and hyper-capitalism, where, like, you know, capital wants you to be atomized, and so that you can pay the marketplace for every interaction that you have. And that can be a little shocking to people, because traditionally those are both anti-capitalism and feminism are both philosophies of the left. Whereas, like, I think rather than thinking of politics and left versus right, I think there's just a humaneness versus capital that we can think of, like, that axis. And, like, capital wants you spending and producing and desiring, and it's a powerful thing, and that can be very productive and enable us to be very rich. But we have to be, I think, being skeptical of capital to preserve human relationships and our connectedness and our in our family life. Like, that doesn't have to be a left-wing idea. Like, being skeptical of capital in order to preserve humanness can be a more conservative position.
Yeah, we were even, I tweeted this week a before and after of a coffee shop in my college town, where before it was very, like, cozy and had, like, a Victorian couch, and, like, the chairs had backs so you could, like, sit there for a long time and read. And it's been taken under new ownership and remodeled, and it looks very modern. The chairs look uncomfortable. It's just been sort of like just sterilized. And so this tweet went viral because the before and after was so stark. And a lot of people were replying to me saying, oh, they changed this because what you want in a cafe for profitability is turnover. So they made it less comfortable so that people no longer will sit there and dwell and, you know, have a coffee with someone, or even, like, be on a date or have a coffee with someone or read or have, like, you know, human interaction, because they want you to go in and go out. And some people were even replying to me saying that they knew that their, like, local Starbucks had intentionally chosen chairs that were uncomfortable in order to encourage turnover. So I don't know how true that is, but it's easy to see, right, that if you're maximizing for capital and not thinking about the axis of human relationships, right, then you would take a place like a coffee shop where people typically connect and spend time with one another in a third place that isn't their home or private space, and turn it into something sterile and ugly and soulless. And so, I don't know, I think that's kind of a good example of what you're talking about.
That tweet did numbers.
It did numbers.
10,000
yeah,
likes.
10,000.
Something crazy. Yeah,
I'm still getting all these replies.
And the coffee shop saw it, and I talked to them about it, and they were just like, oh, we just have good intentions. It's like, yeah, good intentions have bad results sometimes, though.
Yeah,
you meant to look really sleek.
I'm sure they're fine people, but, like, this is something that people are getting sick of, is, like, this kind of
the flattening of the world,
homogenization of spaces, and you know, people want places where they can go connect with one another, where the whole idea isn't just profitability.
To work on your laptop alone.
Yeah, and,
like,
you know,
it's a space that looks like you're supposed to work on your laptop by yourself instead of sit there and have a conversation with someone face to face in a comfortable chair. So
yeah,
everything is going that way. Like McDonald's, we went into a McDonald's recently, my childhood McDonald's, and I remember there used to be this, like, McDonald's used to have a playland, and it was like a ball pit, and maybe it was a little gross, whatever, unsanitary. It was like a ball pit and, like, stuff to climb on, and, like, we had a blast as a kid there. And I go back as an adult because I wanted fries, and it's like just everything is hard edges, and it's like a box. There's no color, everything's gray. And my friend pointed out that millennials aren't having kids, and they're the ones making the marketing decisions. So they're thinking, like, oh, we'll make it like a place where I could work, like, and sit on my laptop. Whereas I guess maybe the prior generation, I don't know, would that have been boomers or, like, the other, like, World War II generation that made this stuff, where it's like, well, we have kids, let's make it, like, a nice place for kids
make
to
it
be.
fun, make it a place we could sit with our kids for 2 hours and have them be entertained. And I remember, like, going to Burger King when I was little and playing in the play set and meeting other kids.
And my mom would bring, like, a stack of magazines. She'd just sit there and read, and then, like, we'd run around, and that's just, like, gone. It's actually really startling to think about. Yeah. So.
Yeah, as the world ages and becomes more childless, like, it affects all the design and feel and look of everything around us.
Yeah, you can see the cultural decline in what we're building. Like, we're not just not
Or
the
what we're
country we
not
used to be.
doing.
We
Yeah.
used to be a country, a proper country.
Well, I even think this is one of my pet tweets, sort of, is, the country that went to the moon was a full 10 years younger on average. Like the average age of an American in 1968 was something like 25 or 20 in the 20s, in mid 20s. And today it's the average age of an American is in the mid 30s because we have a lot more old people and a lot fewer babies. And that changes what your country does, what it thinks about. Like, we're much more concerned about, old age insurance and a lot less concerned about going to the moon because that's the kind of people that we are. And as we go more and more down that path, like that, it's going to be harder and harder to do new things and to be a dynamic country.
Yeah.
I've seen some pretty startling data maps of aging in the average age in Western countries over time, and it's just going to get worse in all of Western Europe and in the United States.
Well, even think about COVID policies,
I was just
right?
going to say that. Yeah, I think I've wondered if the hyper fear and paranoia over the last 2 years has been because this virus more negatively affects people who are older and the country's older. Right, so it's just been dominant, and
I think that has to affect politicians' decision making in a lot of these things, where you have a virus that almost completely spares the young, but hits the old pretty hard. And then you see countries that are deciding to, or states, cities, countries deciding to lock down, to keep kids home from school, to shut down bars and restaurants and things like this in order to keep the virus from spreading. You're clearly saying that it's okay to take away a year or two of young people's lives and make it much less fulfilling, much less connected in exchange for protecting the old.
Yeah, I wrote about this in Evie. I was writing an article about how detrimental COVID policy, especially lockdowns, are to young people who are hoping to date. And one example that I gave of the shift in our mindset is there were reports of people on the Titanic.
Oh, I found this. I wanted to share it.
Yeah, people on the Titanic who were older and were we've had our lives, put the young people in the lifeboats, right?
There was older couples that said that they wanted to save the young and they didn't take up space on the lifeboats.
But it's basically they were willing to make a sacrifice to allow the young to live, right? And it seems increasingly what I've seen with COVID policy is that the old are no longer willing to make sacrifices to allow the young to flourish. It's no, we're gonna lock you in your homes and you're not allowed to go out or do anything because
I might get sick.
Yeah. And so that seems like a total reversal of how we thought about our society in the past. And maybe that does a little bit go back to individualism. So instead of seeing ourselves as collective whole and, we want our young people to thrive because they're the future and we're all part of this together, it's kind of I need to preserve my own life.
Well, I don't even think people think they're I don't think people know where they're at in history or have a sense of temporality, where they're at in time. They just have you have your one mortal life, and people don't really seem to think about what do I make here that goes on beyond me, after I die, lineage, a sense of lineage, and being a part of a history and this long chain of being also seems to be kind of lost. It's you want to lock down your kids, don't you care about having grandkids, great-grandchildren, great-great-great-grandchildren? That I don't think people care about that as much as they used to. It's just about me and what my life looks like.
Yeah, sort of a myopic view of things. Yeah, time.
And I think the America has changed a lot in my lifetime. I think the change was already well underway by the time I was born. But the America that fought World War II, I think had more of a sense of cohesive identity, where it's if I do something that benefits the whole, even at my personal sacrifice, that's good because I identify with the whole. Mm-hmm. But my generation is very much about this went around in the 90s. They said this is the me generation, right?
Yeah,
it's all about me, and it's kind of this society exists in order to benefit me, and if it's not benefiting me, then it's no good, and I'm sure not going to sacrifice for the greater good. There's an old Roman quote that says in Latin, it's dulce et decorum as I forgot how to say it in Latin, but the translation is how sweet it is to die for one's country. And
Wow.
like that's probably something an American in like 1939 would say. I don't think it's something very many Americans. I think it's something some Americans in like the 1960s, especially the older ones, would still say. And I don't think it's something that very many Americans at all today would say. And then it becomes a question like if other people don't care about the common good, then why should I?
Yeah, I remember my mother told me that after the war, there was a lot of like good feeling towards the soldiers. Like my grandfather tried to hitch a ride, but the car was full, and the man in the front seat said, "There's always room for a soldier." And like so just to reiterate that there was this sense of like duty and like being part of something. And now I feel like everybody like. I don't know, I work with a lot of people who call the army like white supremacists and like they don't like them.
People actively dislike our collective whole.
Yeah.
Like the idea is that it's bad and that it's harmful to people and
we're genocidal white supremacists in America.
Yeah,
it's like,
and
the flag is controversial.
Yep.
Like the American flag.
Even from the other side now with the politicization of the military, we see like with the military being a lot more woke than it used to be even a couple of years ago. I've seen a lot of conservative parents say like, I won't let my kids go into the military. Like, I don't want them going to a place that's going to call them a white supremacist or call them a sexist because they're a man. And these are like the families that made up the bulk of our army in the past. It's like blue collar conservative country people, and now they're seeing what's going on in the military, and they're saying like, never will I will not send my son to die for that.
Right.
And so if we don't have that, like who when we need someone to die for the country, like who does it?
Right. And how do we, and people just can't even decide like what the country is. Like you have one group of people saying that it's like built on genocide, white supremacy. Like good luck finding a country that doesn't have a history of like murder, but okay. And one side is saying that and then the other is like thinks it's something else entirely. So yeah, something polarization.
Yeah.
Well, we've been going a little bit. I think it'd be okay to wrap up a bit. Why don't we went a little bit on a lot of different areas, but why don't we just maybe finish up with a bit on celebrities and feminism? What do you, if you could say anything to Lady Gaga, what would you tell her?
Aw, I don't know. I'd say you're very talented. And I don't know what I'd say to her.
Yeah.
She's really talented, and I just like, it's got to be hard to be a woman with a lot of like money and fame, trying to find a man that's like on your level or above. Like I don't know.
Yeah. I guess.
I don't know. She seems really prideful though. Like building like a music empire, you got to be like very into yourself and like maybe have a sense of pride around what you've done, which probably doesn't help her case that much. But hopefully she can find, a guy in her social circles that wants what she wants, and maybe he's also had a long career and he wants something different now too. So
yeah.
It's
I think there's a lot of things about the modern world that are hard for very like talented, ambitious women, and maybe she's gotten caught up in some of those challenges.
Yeah.
But
well, I think it's also just very hard to raise children. Like, if she does find a man to have a child with, and then she's touring all the time, she's famous. I've seen a lot of celebrity marriages end in divorce.
Because something has to give.
Yeah.
And who's going to give?
And then the parents are really busy. You have to imagine the kids are being raised by nannies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at that level, it's just way harder to keep things together. Because I do think like economic reasons keep a lot of couples together too. It's like, well, again, back to optionality. Like, well, we don't have like a ton of choices or a ton of money. If you have a ton of choices and a ton of money, it becomes harder to, I guess, convince yourself to like stay doing what you're doing, which is sad. So I don't think celebrities are people we should really be jealous of.
Yeah, they have a different bag of problems.
Yeah,
related,
it's like
but yeah.
Fame and money doesn't solve your problems. It might solve some problems, then it creates a different set. So,
well, I think we could end there.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you for interviewing us.
All right, thank you for it being interviewed.
That was fun.
Yeah.
All right, bye everyone.